the mistakes that you think the anti-war movement has made over the years, and things that maybe we should have done differently, and different approaches that we make in the future. Clearly, we've had some successes, even some significant successes, but on the other hand, we've also failed in some sense. Wow. So what do you think we've done that we did that wasn't so wise, and things that we should have been doing?
I think there are a lot of things that could have been done a lot better. For one thing, sectors of the anti-war movement, and we know who they were, very nice people, all our friends and so on, undertook tactics. If you're undertaking some, always, if you're any kind of an activist, you're picking something you decide to do, you have to make a distinction between two kinds of tactics. You could call them, feel-good tactics, makes me feel good about myself, and do-good tactics, does something for somebody else. Well, the anti-war movement dissolved to a large extent into feel-good tactics, which were harmful. In fact, the Vietnamese were aware of it. Like they talked to them. What they liked was quiet, nonviolent demonstrations. A group of women standing quietly somewhere. What they didn't like was what was being done. Say weathermen. These are tactics that are understandable from the point of view of the people. They were frustrated, they were bitter, nothing was working. Okay, let's go out and smash some windows. Or let's go out and have a fight in a Third Avenue bar and show the people we're authentic and so on. Well, these are like just gifts to the ultra-hawks. They helped build up support for the war. And it was obvious they were going to have that effect. And a lot of it was that. I mean, especially as the movement sort of, kind of dissolved into sects, like after '68, a lot of it was that. So a lot of it was just self-destructive. The other big error was to stop. I mean, by 1975, end of the war, around 70% of the population condemned the war as fundamentally wrong and immoral, not a mistake. Those are kind of unbelievable figures, because nobody ever said that. Where'd they get it from? What do they even mean? Who knows? Nobody checked. But, that meant there was a huge reservoir of possible support for anti-war activity. It was dissolved. It left. Everybody went away. You started condemning the Khmer Rouge or doing some other thing. And, okay, so then comes the Central American massacres, and so it goes on. Now, there are other things. Like, I have almost nobody agrees with me about this. But my friends on the left, many of them don't even understand my own view, and which goes back to around 1970, that the U.S. won the war. The business world recognized that, like you read it in the Forrester Economic Review. But the left is committed to the doctrine that we won. We stopped the war, the Vietnamese won, the people united, and the rest of it. That's not what happened. We have a rich documentary record, and it's very instructive. We should think about it, and be intellectually honest about it. The U.S. didn't go to war in order to conquer Vietnam. In fact, it didn't care if Vietnam dropped off the planet. It didn't care. But it went to war for good reasons.
You would think people in the movement would understand that.
And, it was kind of always pretty clear, but we have a rich documentary record. In fact, I've had it since the Pentagon Papers. They went to war for the usual reasons. The mafia principle, which is the dominant principle in world affairs. The Godfather does not accept disobedience. It's dangerous. If one country gets away with disobedience, no matter how tiny it is, somebody else will get the idea, and they'll be disobedient. Pretty soon the whole system erodes. That's basically one of the dominant principles in world affairs. And Vietnam is a case in point. They were afraid that Vietnamese nationalism would be successful. You'd have successful economic development. It would, like, to use Kissinger's terminology, it would be a virus that would spread contagion. So it spread to Thailand, Malaysia, go on to Indonesia. Now you're in real trouble. Indonesia has real resources. Pretty soon, maybe ultimately Japan, which John Dower, Asia historian John Dower, called the super domino. Japan would accommodate, was the word that was used, to an independent East and Southeast Asia. It would become its technological and military center, which would mean that the United States would have lost the specific phase of the First or Second World War. Well, 1950, they weren't ready to lose the Second World War. So you got to stop. You got a virus, it's spreading contagion, there's a cure. Destroy the virus and inoculate the potential victims. It was done. South Vietnam was pretty much destroyed even by 1965, and the rest of Indochina not long afterwards, never be a model for independent development. The surrounding countries were inoculated by vicious dictatorships. The most important was Indonesia, really rich. In 1965 came the Suharto coup, greeted with total euphoria in the United States, killed maybe 1 million people, destroyed the only mass popular organization, opened the country up to the West. No more accommodation, no more contagion. In fact, with George Bundy, who was not a total fool, and later he was a national security advisor for Kennedy and Johnson. In later years, in retrospect, he said, in retrospect, we should have stopped the war in '65. He was right. Vietnam was already essentially destroyed, no virus. Indonesia, the big prize, is inoculated. You got a vicious military dictatorship, our kind of guy, as Clinton called him. So, Japan's safe, will be on our side. So what's the point of destroying the rest of the place? It's a waste of time. Okay, I think the anti-war movement should understand that, because that's a pattern that is followed over and over again. It is a dominant principle of international affairs. It makes perfect sense. It's kind of interesting. It's sometimes ridiculed, like the domino theory. Who believes that? Ha ha ha. Yeah, everybody believes it because it's true. The world's mostly run like the mafia. And if you don't understand that, you're not going to understand the next thing that happens in the world. In fact, that's part of the reason for the incredible antagonism to Iran. Why Iran? I mean, there's a terrible government. There's a lot of terrible governments, like Saudi Arabia's a lot worse. Well, they were disobedient. You're not going to let them get away with it. In fact, it's even said. It says, well, they took hostages. How can we let them get away with that? Disobedience. Cuba is a striking example. I mean, for decades, the majority of the population has been in favor of normalizing relations with Cuba. Okay, disregarding the population is normal. The business world is in favor of it, has been for a long time. Big sectors, energy, agribusiness, pharmaceuticals, really powerful sectors. But we can't do it. We've got to keep punishing them because they were disobedient. And you don't get away with that.